I've already mentioned that the word toldot is an important word in the book of Bereshit, right? That it's a very common word in Bereshit and not so common in other books. And I think I quoted Rabbi Yoel Ben Nun, but I think I'll quote him again, that he says that often when we read Sefer Bereshit, we read the stories and skip, the list of genealogy. And he says the list of genealogy are actually really important. And I think that sometimes certain stories are titled Ele Toldot because it's the story of how, Am Yisrael was chosen and kind of what we went through. So that's how the sixth parsha starts. Ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Abraham oled et Yitzchak. Now, I think it's fascinating that Yitzchak, who we were just he just entered the stage last week's parsha. At the end of last week's parsha, he kind of entered center stage, and already at the beginning of this week's parsha, we have Yaakov and Esav. So Yitzchak doesn't have a lot of screen time. Like we don't really focus on him for very long, and we're going to talk a little bit about why. And I think that Yitzchak is an underappreciated character. When I was on Shlichut in Cleveland, Ohio, so they decided to have Yitzchak Appreciation Day because they feel like Yitzchak wasn't appreciated enough. And I think it's true that Yitzchak is one of the less appreciated avot. I mean, there are only three, but we kind of connect to Abraham and Yaakov, and I think less to Yitzchak.
Do you think really that we don't? Meaning that at the end, like the whole thing with the error and the fact that he is committed to staying in Eretz Yisrael and that we learn that from him, you don't think like that's something?
I think one of his main characteristics has to do with boundaries. And I think we're not so comfortable with boundaries. And I think the fact that he's deen oriented, I think today people, deen, I think that those characteristics are weak in our generation. Now, I agree that there's a very strong Eretz Yisrael aspect in Yitzchak, but it's usually in the context of the fact that he never left. Now, we don't want to say never leave because we like to leave. It's fun. We go to Naples and we go, right?
Yeah.
And I think that our generation is less, it's not as easy for us to swallow what he kind of represents.
Can I say, like, I don't mean it at all like condescending or nasty if anybody has any children with any issues. I'm not saying it in negative. To me, like, the impression I always got from Yitzchak was he was like a little bit like on the spectrum. I mean, he didn't leave. He did everything the way it was supposed to be. He was from trauma. There was a lot of things that happened. I just feel like some of his behavior, which is okay. I feel like in today's world, it's okay to say maybe that's what it was. And that's what he did. But like, if I looked at it, like I feel like there's something there. And maybe Chazal doesn't want to go into it because they just don't want to, take away from maybe the whole, the whole concept of what happened during Afghanistan and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
that's
so so I'm going to make a couple comments on that if you don't mind. So first of all, I have a brother in the spectrum.
Okay,
and
that's what I'm saying. It's not.
I'm not taking it.
People on the spectrum can achieve and can become.
I agree 100%.
Doctors, they can be doctors.
It's a very good question. If you're born like that, if you're not born like that, it's not so clear.
Right.
And it's also very Yaakov. Yaakov. So Yaakov was born. My brother was certain, born things. Like he does have, a genetic disease that he was born with, but the spectrum is something that's also very much sivati. What's the word? I can't think of the word. No, it's affected by, society. Like it's not just mulad. It's not just something you're born with. Nature, nurture. So there's both aspects. Mm-hmm. But I think that today we see that there are a lot of people that are actually on the spectrum. And there are a lot of people who have certain tendencies that we might like call spectrum style tendencies, but they're not people on the spectrum. Like the fact that somebody's quiet or serious, or like some guys, they sit in yeshiva for 20 years. Are they all on the spectrum? Some of them might be, but I don't think they all are. So personally,
right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's not
exactly. So I wouldn't say that Yitzchak is on the spectrum, but I think that Yitzchak, yes, was a certain type of character that we today, that's not the character we put on a pedestal in our Dati Leumi circles. Like maybe in the Haredi world, Dafka, that is what people put on a pedestal. Someone who goes to yeshiva for many, many years, and he's very like, he follows the rules. I just feel like that in the Dati Leumi world, this isn't the character that we necessarily aspire to be. And I think that this is a problem personally. I think this is the qualities that Yitzchak represents are qualities that are so necessary. And part of what we're going to talk about today is that how Yitzchak I think, again, it's sometimes like not so popular, this side, but it's so important. So I'm not saying anything against Yitzhak at all, but I'm saying that the underappreciation today, I think, comes from a place that the things that he represents are things that today we don't understand the importance of it. Anyway, we'll get there. Okay, so Elet Yitzhak, Abraham Yitzhak ben Abraham, Abraham Yitzhak, and the Midrash says that Abraham Yitzhak, the Midrash talks about how they look exactly alike, and we're going to see that inside soon. And then it tells us how old Yitzhak is. Yitzhak ben 40 shana v'kachto et Rivka. So he was 40 years old, and he married Rivka. And this is what a lot of the Midrashim we talked about how Rivka was 3 or not 3 are based on this idea that if it's Akedah, all the math is based. This is one of the pieces in the math. And interestingly enough, depending on how old she was when she got married, she might have been super young when it says here that she's barren, right? So obviously if she's 3, she's barren, but obviously she's not 3 anymore. But anyway, it's just interesting to think about how we have Sarah, who had a baby at 90, right? Mm-hmm. And Rivka, who, I don't know, maybe she was 12, maybe she was 16. I don't know how old she was, right?
But she's not 90.
But she's not 90, right? It's interesting. And also I think Rachel and Leah, who both, there are discussions in Chazal about whether maybe originally they were both barren. I know Leah has children very quickly, but the Chazal say that she also was barren to begin with. So they were also young. It's like a different story, I think, than Sarah's being Akara. Anyway, then she's Akara, and both of them they daven. Ve'yatar Yitzchak lenochach ishto ki Akara ve'yatar laHashem. This pasuk, it's interesting. The word vayetar is the word that we use both for the request and for the response. And it's not exactly the same word, but it's vayetar vayatir. Okay, and vayetar means to beseech or to request very strongly, and vayatir means to answer or to like give what you were asked for. I guess I can't think of the right word for that. And what?
It's interesting because here it says like which is like tefillah, like you're asking
like atira.
Right. But you don't see that with Sarah. Like here she's older. You never ever once see anything with Abraham or with
neither
Sarah.
Of them.
She's young, but right away they go to tefillah.
Nobody else davens. Also Rachel, Yaakov. No, Rachel says to him, "Why don't Havali banim ve'maynet metanoch?" In the Midrash explains that she's saying, "Hey, why don't you daven like your father did?"
But I'm saying that it's brought up, like
it's brought up.
Abraham had so many years, but you never once see that.
But it's brought up in Midrash. In Pshat, she just says Havali banim. So in Pshat, it's not mentioned anywhere besides here. This idea of davening for children. It's interesting. Yeah. Anyway, but I think it's fascinating how this word atira is both the request and the response. And Chazal talk about the etar that it's a shovel. It's like a shovel, and that there's this idea that part of what Tzaddik does when he davens is there's like a big pile and he like flips it around, and like that's what tefillah is. Tefillah, is taking like the pieces of reality and kind of like shaking them up and moving them around. Anyway. And she gets pregnant, and then she is distraught because right? What is going on? There's something going on in there, and she doesn't understand what's going on. And she, and what do you do when you don't know what's going on? Right? You have an issue. You go to Hashem. Also, I feel like it's in sync with Vayetal, right? You don't have children, you daven to Hashem. You're pregnant and something's wrong, you go to Hashem, obviously, right? Now the Midrash says that she goes to the Bet Midrash of Shem Ve'ever, and the response, even though in Pshat it says Vayomer La, Hashem La, in the Midrash it's, I forget who, Shem or Ever, I think Shem telling her. Anyway, so this piece is one of the big question marks in the Parsha in my mind. She gets this kind of like nevuah, right? She gets this like, these psukim, this message of what's going to happen, and right, what does it say? Shnei goyim bebitnech, u'shnei leumim mime'ayich yiparedu, u'leom mileom ye'ematz, v'rav ya'avod tza'ir. So there are 2 nations in your womb, and they will separate, and there'll be 2 different nationalities, and they will ye'ematz, which sounds like there'll be some kind of struggle between them. The Rav Yavod Sa'ir, meaning the older one or the stronger one will be subjugated to the younger one. Okay, so wow, right? She doesn't even know she has twins, and already she's hearing this whole, like, they're two and there's going to be nations and they're going to be fighting, and right, what in the world? Now, the big question is, does she tell Yitzchak, right? Because all through this story, we're going to have the whole story of the bracha and what's he thinking, what she's thinking, and it seems in Pshat that she never told him.
Sorry, how did she get this information?
In the pasuk says V'yomer Hashem la. It sounds like it's a nevuah in the pasuk. The Midrash tells us that it wasn't a direct nevuah, that Shem gave her this message. Shem, right, one of the sons of Noach. So she goes to the Beit Midrash and she shares her troubles, and the Rav gives her this nevuah. So in any case, it's clear that the Torah sees this as something that is a real message. And going forward, she has this clarity that the younger one will be the chosen one, right? So again, soon we'll see all the personal whatever, but from the outright, she knows that the younger one is supposed to be chosen, right? And apparently Yitzchak doesn't.
Yeah, I think Sivan Rav Meir, do you get her little?
Sometimes.
So this week she talked about the lack of communication that was there. It was missing.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this here before, but I remember years ago we had, like, the Parsha sheets, and there's not one word spoken between Yitzchak and Rivka at any point, right? In Pshat, not one. And I remember one week there were two Parsha sheets, and we sat, and one said, I think it was Rav Sherlo and Rav Viner. Rav Sherlo talked about how it's, not perfect and maybe a little bit dysfunctional, the fact that they don't communicate. And Rav Viner talked about how their communication is so deep and at such a high level, they don't need any words. It's just so intuitive. And I'd like to say the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, right? That I can't imagine, it said he loved her, right? I can't imagine that their communication was totally, dysfunctional, but there's something here that, yes, there's no communication. And I think it's most potent here in this piece, right? Did she tell him? Did she not tell him? If she didn't tell him, why didn't she tell him? Right? Why didn't she tell him that she had this nevuah? Maybe she was embarrassed that she went to ask. Maybe she was embarrassed that she was in pain. I don't know.
Maybe
right?
she assumed that he was also told.
Maybe she assumed he knew. Maybe she thought that it was a nevuah only for her. There are all different explanations. That if she received it, maybe she thought he wasn't supposed to be told. Whatever it is, it's a question. Yes.
But you know what? It then makes sense, the fact that she couldn't have them right away, that they had to spend time together first and develop themselves, and then taking on this challenge, then they could have the children together. Like, I feel
I didn't understand that she didn't have, that they weren't born right away. You're saying
that they weren't born right away.
She had to have
this, right? They have to be this, like, building up. You don't see what went on personally in their lifestyle, but I feel like almost like they had to connect in their own way. And
the couple, you're saying?
Yes, as a couple. And then I think to be able to take on, because it was a challenging thing. And for them to get through this, because it was a very big nisayon that they had to go through. I feel like that time alone was important for them.
Interesting.
That's my theory.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, I want to point out a couple more things in this nevuah that she gets. Really, just one more thing. The word Rav, we'll see throughout, very much characterizes Esav.
Huh?
Rav, the word Rav.
Characterizes?
Esav. So here it says the Rav Yavot Seir, and then later we'll see in Vayishlach, not next week, after next week, we'll see that we have, right, Yaakov and Esav, yesh li Rav, yesh li kol. Anyway, this word Rav, I think is very,
why?
What is Rav? Yeah. So Rav is related to the word harbe, okay? And when we talk about Parashat Vayishlach, we talk about how harbe is relative, like it's more, right? And we like to think of Yaakov's midah as being related to like kol, like accepting what Hashem gives as is. But I think there's more to it than that. I think part of what Rav is that there's some kind of aspect of Esav that wants to be big, always wants to be better or more than everybody else. Something. It's not just acquiring possessions. It's a sense of self.
Is it a negative connotation?
I'm going to suggest as we go forward that it could be negative and it could be positive. With Esav, I think that the pshat is not so negative, the Midrash takes it to a very negative place. He's one of those characters, and in Pshat, you're like, hey, oh no, he really got the raw end, But when you read the Midrashim, he comes out really, really seriously negative. So I think when we're reading Pshat, it doesn't sound so bad. But yes, the Midrashim take it to a negative place. Okay, and then they're born. This one comes out very red-headed. The first one.
And he never had a birth, right?
It doesn't say that he has a bris, and I think there's a midrash that he was born circumcised, maybe.
What I understood was he was born very, very red, and you can't bris a child when they're red, and then
I think there's a midrash. I'm pretty sure there's a midrash that he was born circumcised, and this is one of the reasons that Yitzchak thought that he was so special. The word Esav is very closely related to the word asui, right? Made.
Oh.
And I think there's asui means like well done. Like, okay, so I think there's a midrash, and I don't remember where, but maybe we'll look in Rashi soon. I think there's a midrash that says that he was born circumcised. But anyway, so he was named Esav, and it's interesting that it doesn't say, read the next episode and you'll see the difference, but I'm just pointing out that it says, Vaikireu Shmo Esav. Who? It doesn't say who called him Esav. It sounds like that's just what everyone called him. They called him. Okay, we'll see in a minute that it says Vaikra Shmo Yaakov in about. So then he came out, his brother, right? They're brothers. It's not just the next one. There's the Rishon, and then there's the brother, and he's holding on to Esav's akev, right, to his heel. Vaikra Shmo Yaakov. Somebody, hopefully their father, called him Yaakov. Now it's also interesting that going forward, when Yaakov has children, who names the children? The wives, the mothers really usually choose the names going forward, right? And also Cain, it says, right, she says Kaniti, I'm not saying this right, but Chava names Cain. And here, Esav is named by, I don't know, and Yaakov, it sounds like his named by Yitzchak. It doesn't say that outright, but that's what it sounds like. And then it says, Yitzchak ben 60 shana beledet otam. So Yitzchak is 60 years old when they're born. Now, why does it say this? It's so interesting. We don't have so many dates usually in people's lives. Yitzchak is very dated. We have a lot of dates in his life. He's 40, he's 60. Anyway, it also doesn't mention Rivka's age anywhere. I don't even know if it says that. I don't think it ever says their age. Anyway,
60 is a half a lifetime.
60 is a half a lifetime in their time, a little less, right? They lived a little more than 120. Anyway, the boys grow up. So we have kind of like a description. So what's the description? Esav is ish yodeh tzayid. He is well versed in hunting. And Chazal say tzayid is also tzayid b'fi, meaning lying. Okay, that's Chazal. Yeah, Chazal say that he was his tongue was very slick. Tzayid b'fi, he had a hunting tongue, meaning he tricked Yaakov. And I think this is where Chazal talk about how he tricked Yaakov into thinking he's a tzaddik. He would ask him, "Ech me'asrim et hamelach." Right? I'm sorry, what did I say?
You said Yaakov.
I meant Yitzchak, thank you. Yeah. That he would ask, he wanted to show his father that he's such a tzaddik that he would ask him, I have some salt. How do I do Trumas U'Maasros from salt? But you don't do Trumas U'Maasros from salt, right? So Chazal talk about how Esav was very well versed in trickery. That's what they say. And again, this is what I was saying. How in Pshat it just says issue that side. He's a hunter. It doesn't necessarily sound like a bad thing. And Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim, so he's a simple person and he's Yoshev Ohalim.
What does that mean?
Ishtam literally means
the other one.
Yoshev Ohalim. He sits in the tent. And he, the word tam is a very interesting word. It means simple or naive, but it also is related to the word tmimut. Tmimut is complete, right? Torat Hashem tmima, right? Or tam is tam v'nishlam. When something's over, you say it's tam. And I think that a lot of the ideas that kind of juxtapose the Rab of Esav and the Kol of Yaakov are also related to this word. Tam is also Kol. It's like something very complete. But I want to say something before we go on. I think it's interesting that I'm backtracking for a second. The word that very much characterizes Avraham is the word Vayar. Vayar, Vayera. It's a very, very common word in the stories of Avraham. Okay, Avraham is very much characterized by the word Vayar. And I haven't checked yet, but I think there are less Vayars with Yitzchak. There are a few, but I think not as many. And I'm working on what the word characterizing Yaakov is, but I think Yoshev comes up a lot. He wants to lashev, he can lashev, he can't lashev. He wants to settle down. He wants to just be settled. And he ends up going through so much stuff. And I think that we start out by saying, yes, he likes to stay home. He likes to stay put. But going forward, oh my goodness, he has so many trials and tribulations, and he can't stay put. He can't. He's sensed, and he's right. Anyway, but we start out with this idea that he's Ishtam Yoshev Olim. He likes to stay put, to Yoshev, whatever that means. We'll come back to it. Then Yaakov. This is a story how they actually Yaakov sells his bechorah, right? Vayazid Yaakov nazid. He makes a nazid. He makes a stew, and Esav ba'min esadeh v'hu ayef. So Esav comes from the field and he's very tired. Vayamer Esav el Yaakov. Esav says to Yaakov, Hal iteni na min ha'adom ha'adom hazeh. Please give me some of that. And the word he says, Hal iteni, means to swallow. And I always think about it. He says, he just wants, or he doesn't even want to chew it. He wants to just, right? It doesn't say gulps it. He says, pour it down my throat. There's like almost a description. And if we talked about Yitzchak maybe being on the spectrum, so I like to think of Esav as being ADD. That's always my image of Esav, right? I'm dying here, right? I don't know how many of you have kids with ADD, but I do. And ADHD, right? And that's what is right now is whatever I feel right this second, that's the reality. And so we diagnosed everybody now we're good, right? Now but I really do think there is some level of ADHD or ADD in Esav, and that's what he says. He says, Haliteni dam minami adam hazeh ke'anef anochi al ken kara shmo Edom. They called him Edom because he wanted the Adom hazeh. V'yomer Yaakov says to him, Michra kayom et bechoratcha li. So Yaakov is kind of devious here. Like after we said that, Chazal say that Esav is a little bit tricky and devious. Here, Yaakov is being a little bit, right? Sell me my bechorah. And he knows that Esav is, not in his element. I'm dying here. Oh, whatever. If I'm not going to live through today, why do I care if I'm going to be a bechor or not? And he says, fine. And Yaakov is smart. He says, Hishavali. I want you to swear to me. I don't want you to tell me tomorrow, I didn't mean it. So he sells his bechorat to Yaakov. He gave him bread and he gave him this nezid dashim. So it says he ate and he drank and he got up and he went and he vayiviz. Okay, and again, talking about the pshat and the drash. So this word, I think, is the most negative word we have about vayiviz. Means he like disrespected. He shamed his bechorah, meaning he didn't take it seriously. He had this very big gift and he just passed it right away. Now, one of the big questions in this week's parsha is what is the relationship between this and the end of the parsha, right? Because at the end, we're going to go forward. I'm going to see the whole story with the bracha, right? There's a bechorah and there's a bracha. Now, it's not the same thing, right? What is bechor and what is bracha? What is bechor? It's the firstborn, right? But what does that mean? What does that mean? He sold him as bechorah. He's going to be the firstborn.
The firstborn usually gets a little bit more.
Right. So the firstborn traditionally had a double inheritance. Whatever everybody got, he got double in the Torah. Okay. And
it's June.
You could just press the side.
It's June.
You want to tell her that? Anyway, so
where did it come from?
Yeah.
Bechorah. What, the idea that you get double? Right. So I want to say a couple words.
There was a concept of getting all the brachos and getting all the whatever else. Where did that actually come from?
So I think there was we don't know where it came from. There are a lot of things in the Torah that I think were like basic social, like cultural things that were accepted, and the Torah does similar things, not always exactly, but I think the assumption that there was going to be one child that would end up being in charge and taking care of everybody else, I think that's where this comes from. Like, think about it. Often the oldest ends up, taking care of the parents when they're old and when their kids need it. Like, is this true? Yes, you're nodding.
Sit with my husband here.
You didn't see some of that conflict when it came to Sarah, when it came to
Ishmael and Yitzchak. Yes. Well, also Cain and Hevel. I mean, some people say that the book of Bereshit is the book of brothers, right? The brothers and the dispute between brothers. And at the end of the day, the oldest is never chosen instead of Bereshit, never, from the beginning to the end, right? Cain and Hevel, the sons of Noach, and Ishmael and Yitzchak and Esav and Yaakov. And
why is that? That is interesting.
So theoretically,
did you make all your mistakes with the oldest?
I think that theoretically the oldest sometimes takes the responsibility, but I think part of what the Torah is trying to tell us is that the Bechorah goes to the responsible one, not necessarily to the firstborn physically. And I think that part of what Chazal say about this here, there are all kinds of ideas about why Yaakov. Why did Yaakov want the Bechorah? Why do you want a double inheritance? So if we're assuming that the Bechorah and the Bracha are one and the same, then we totally understand that he wants to be. He says, "I'm the one who needs to be the continuation of this nation." Like, obviously, he was the one who's mat'im, right? So if they're one and the same, then we understand. But I think part of the story of this is parsha that question: are they one and the same? And we're gonna analyze that a little bit soon, also in the Bracha. But it seems like Yaakov had some kind of understanding that he needed to be the one that would lead this ship, like that he needed to be the one directing the story, and that Esav didn't have it in him.
Yeah, but we can see that. We can see according to his offi, the way he behaves, and no.
So yes, it doesn't seem like Esav is very. It doesn't seem like he has much foresight. Like, it seems like, again, he lives in the moment, and we see this going forward also. But it's interesting that the way Yaakov deals with this, he ends up paying a very heavy price. And sometimes I wonder if maybe there were other options, but we'll talk about both, whether they're up. Anyway, let's
continue with Moshe, because Moshe has the same issue.
And Ephraim and Menashe, right? Moshe and Aaron.
So
it's a constant, it's a thread that goes through, yes.
Yeah, but there's something I don't understand. So Esav sells his birthright, no problem.
Right.
And then later on in the Pasha, Yaakov steals his birthright, and then he has a major issue. So what changes?
So I'm suggesting that there are two different things. There's the birthright and there's bracha, and that they're not one and the same. Okay, we're going to see it inside. Okay. Anyway, so I just wanted to comment on the fact that we mentioned when Abraham had the guests that there's a plethora of verbs, and then again when Rivka hosts the Eved, there are a lot of verbs, and this pasuk I think is reminiscent of those pasukim. Vayochal, vayesh, vayakam, vayelech, vayiviz. That's a very long string of verbs, but here it's the opposite. Here he's not hosting anybody. He's just consuming, right? He's the recipient, not the right. Anyway, I think it's interesting. So the next piece I'm going to mention, but we're not going to read inside because I don't really want to focus on it, but I'm going to mention it. So Vayira Ba'aretz, and they go to Grar, and we say, hey, we've been here before. What's going on, right? So we have a repeat. The story we had twice with Abraham, we have again with Yitzchak now. He goes to Grar, and Avimelech sees Sarah and Metzachek, whatever. After I said that the verbs, right, of the avot, so I didn't mention the verbs of Yitzchak. So there's Metzachek, which comes up quite a bit, Yitzchak, Metzachek, and they called him Yitzchak, right? And there's also Reach, we'll get to Reach. But anyway, so there's the story with Avimelech that, again, I don't really want to go into, but I do want to say in a sentence that, Hindi, you mentioned that it's very troubling for you, these stories.
That's why I say don't go into it.
I know, so I'm not going to go into it. I'm just going to say one sentence that I think that the world they live in was a very different world, and I feel like it's hard for us to even bridge this gap and try to grasp, But yes, I don't have so much to say about the story. Maybe next year. Yeah, next year we'll talk about this one. Maybe. Okay. Anyway, and then it's interesting how there's part of who Yitzchak is his stories are kind of like related to the stories of his father. There's very little new in his life. I mean, his sons, obviously, there's a lot of new stuff there, but he goes to Gerar and a very similar story repeats, just like Abraham. And then he spends all this time redigging the wells that Abraham dug. And I think part of the essence of Yitzchak is that he's trying to finish the work that Abraham started. And I think part of what we talked about, how his attributes are boundaries and holding things. This is what he does. Abraham had a beautiful dream, and he had a philosophy, and he called out Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. And what Yitzchak has to do is he has to institutionalize it. And for that, you need these attributes of boundaries and holding things down. And that's what din is, it's structure. And that's Yitzchak's job. Yitzchak's job is to hold on tight to what Abraham set out to do. And I think it's a big thing. And we're going to get back to it. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the brachot. And the brachot start, well, just before that, we were talking about Esav. So in Perek Kaf Pasuk Lamed Daled, it says, "Vehi Esav ben 40 shana veikach ishat Yehudit bat be'eri." So he gets married, and his parents are not happy. Okay, Ve'tien amorat ruach leYitzchak uleRivka. So here they stand together, and they're not happy that Esav marries this woman from Bnot Canaan, I think, right? It's a Yehudit bat be'eri Achiti. I guess whatever, I don't know. They're not happy. Anyway, the next Perek really deals with the story of the brachot, and it starts out by saying, it starts out by saying Yitzchak is not seeing clearly. Okay, and I think this introduction is very important. It's telling us that Yitzchak's senses are not as strong as they were. He's getting old, and his eyes are not right. And Arab Meidan likes to say that often, or maybe it's not Arab Meidan, maybe it's Ravioni, somebody.
We're not going to check.
You're not going to check it. No. I want to check it. I think it's Ravioni Grossman. Says that often when somebody doesn't see, it means that they see more. But Dafka, in this case, that's not the connotation. It doesn't sound like they're telling us
vision had been impaired.
Right. So it's not just his physical vision. There's something more.
Or he didn't want to see.
Maybe he had a hard time seeing for whatever reason. And when I talked about how the word Vayar is so central in the life of Abraham and not so central in the life of Yitzchak, maybe this is why. Maybe the Midrash says that his eyes were harmed already at the Akedah. And that maybe there was something in his life that was a little bit, there was a distance between, maybe his vision was always a little bit.
Wasn't it also affected by it?
So that's the Akedah. Oh, you're saying the Kethoret of the wise, right? So there are midrashim about why his eyesight wasn't perfect, but in any case, there's this idea that there was some kind of lack of sight, and not just a physical lack of sight.
So you're talking about a lack of connection?
I'm saying that
connection in a different way.
I'm saying that there was something about Yitzchak that impaired his grasp on reality, I think. And I know this kind of sounds like where you were going, Hindi. But anyway, okay.
Because he had no problem seeing Rivka, that helped him like almost fall when he saw her the first time. Like that. It's
interesting that you're saying that, because last week on Shabbat I was in a class on the Parsha, and one of the women there said, we read the psukim of how they met, Rivka and Yitzchak. And one of the women said, it's so interesting how it says that Rivka saw him and he saw Gmalim. It doesn't say that he saw her.
Really?
And so maybe he needed glasses. He sees, he doesn't actually see her. He sees, their back, right? There's a big mass of something coming back here. Oh, it must be the camels with my new wife, right? I don't know. I'm just saying that. But anyway, it seems, we don't know. But the Midrashim seem to suggest that his vision was impaired in more than just physical way.
Okay.
Anyway, but he says, I know I'm getting old, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. And he says to Esav, go and he calls Esav, and Esav says Hineni, which again is such a positive, right? Again, I'm going back to that rift between the Pshat and the Drash. So that's in Pasuk Perek Kazayin Pasuk Aleph. Esav says Hineni, and Yitzchak sends him to bring him food, and And Rivka shomat. Rivka hears this, and she goes straight to her other son, and he says, I need you to step in now.
Why? Why did she do that?
Why did she do that? Okay. So hold on. Okay. So she calls Yaakov, and she brings him in, and she dresses him in Esav's clothes. And all through the story, when Yaakov comes to Yitzchak, it's very clear that he's not sure. And I just want to read some of that. And I see our time is running out. He comes to him. She brings the food. ויבוא אל אביו, אמן פרק כ"ז, פסוק י"ח. ויבוא אל אביו ויאמר אבי. He comes to his father. ויאמר הנני, מי אתה בני? So Yitzchak says, I'm here. Who are you? ויאמר יעקב אל אביו, אנוכי עשיו בכורך. He says, I am your oldest son, עשיו. עשיתי את אשר דיברת. I did what you asked me to do. קום נא שבה והחליט, right? And then, right, give me a blessing. And then Yitzchak answers him. Yitzchak says, no, you're back really fast. He answers him, and then he says, come, I need to feel you, right? He's not sure, right? I don't know if he knows.
So
but I guess,
why did Yaakov go? Why did he also go ahead with this whole?
Why did he go with it? I don't know. Hold on. Okay. He comes and his
mother told him to.
Right. His mother told him to.
And not only that, he knows he really deserves, now that he has the
Bechorah, that he deserves, that he deserves the yeah. Okay, hold on. And then he comes and Yitzchak feels him and he says, this is the famous Hakol Kol Yaakov V'Adayim Yedei Esav, right? It's the voice of Yaakov and it's the hands of Esav, right? And this has become like a symbol of Judaism, right? That the Kol is the kind of the attribute of the Jews, that they have this connection with Hashem. The Kol and the Yadayim, the physicality is more like an attribute of the Goyim, and I'm gonna say a couple words about that. I don't know if we'll get to it this week or next week. And then it says, so the pasuk says, Yitzchak didn't recognize him. Yitzchak was convinced. This is where the pasuk says, yes, Yitzchak was convinced, but still he asked him again, he asked him again, and he says, okay. And then he agrees to take the food and to eat it. And I'm just gonna mention that I said that there's reach, but so here vayarach reach habgadim, so he smells the smell of the clothes, and then he gives them a blessing. Okay.
10
so
blessings, right?
What?
10 blessings.
10 blessings. Okay.
From what I understand.
Yeah, יכול להיות.
10 blessings.
Yeah. Anyway, so the first blessing he gives him is like this: "Veitel lecha Elokim mital hashamayim mimashmanei haaretz berov dagan v'tirosh." I will give you from the tal, the dew of the sky, and the wealth of the earth, and v'yavducha amim v'yishtachvu lecha laomim. So everybody will be subjugated to you. Hevegvir le'achecha. You will be a leader, and your brothers' nations will bow down to you. So the people who curse you will be cursed, people who bless you will be blessed. Okay. And then he ends and Esav comes. And I don't want to go into all of the conversation between Esav and Yaakov, but Esav comes and he's so upset. And here Chazal Dafka see this as something we end up paying for, right? So when he's Ve'cherad chada gdola, so Chazal talk about how we were punished for that in Shushan. That part of the story of Shushan is because of this. So there is a little bit of a criticism here on Yaakov, and even more next week when there's more criticism on Yaakov. And he comes and he says, you don't have a blessing for me. Oh, I'm sorry, not this. Veitzak tzaka gdola, not Ve'cherad. That's Ve'cherad Yitzchak. But when Esav says Veitzak tzaka gdola, so it says that Mordechai Veitzak. So that's what that was the Midrash connects. And then Yitzchak says, he took your blessing. He came and he was devious and he took your blessing. And Esav answers, he cheated me twice. Okay, so it's clear here that there are two things. He says he took my birthright and now he took my bracha too.
Please explain to me, how come he could only give the bracha
to one?
Yeah.
Okay, so hold on one second, okay? And then he says, don't you have a blessing for me too? Can't you give me a blessing too? And then Yitzchak gives him a blessing, but it's not such a big blessing. He says, Hen gvir samticha. So he says, yeah, I'm sorry. He says, I made him in charge, but what am I? But he says, what you said, you only have one blessing? Bless me too. And he says, he says, you will have the riches and the tal of the shamayim. And then he says, he says, you will live on the sword and you will be subjugated to your brother. So he says, but if he ever subjugates you too intensely, then you will throw him off. Okay, that's the blessing he gives him, and Esav is very upset. And but I want to read something that people don't always notice. Okay, so after all of this, Esav is so upset, and then Rivka comes to tell Yitzchak that they have to send Yaakov off to marry a woman somewhere else, right? Oh, he'll marry someone from Bnot Chet, right? Just like Esav does. And then Vayikra Yitzchak el Yaakov ve'varech oto. And he says, don't marry women from here. And he gives them a bracha. There's a new bracha here. So I'm reading Perek Chet Pasuk Gimel.
Wait, who's giving the bracha?
Yitzchak is giving Yaakov his bracha.
Another bracha.
Another bracha.
Because he's giving it to the son who he knows is Yaakov.
This apparently was the bracha he always planned to give Yaakov. Right, and what's the content of this bracha? It says, Ve'el Shaddai yevarech otcha ve'yafercha ve'yarbecha ve'ita likal amim. Hashem will bless you and you will be to a nation, to a great nation. And you will be blessed with bracha of Avraham. Lecha ulezarecha, l'rishtecha et eretz megorecha, you will inherit the land. Asher natan lecha Avraham. So I think it's very clear that, I forget who says this, but there is a Parshan who says this, that Yitzchak never planned for Esav to be the one to continue the Jewish nation. That wasn't even a question. But he did want to give him a blessing. He wanted to give him a blessing of physical wealth. He wanted to give him a blessing of strength. But now Yaakov got that too. So it's not that, it's not that Yitzchak was so confused that he didn't see reality, that he really thought Esav was such a good guy that he could totally be, the next Avram Avinu, the next Avinu, right? He understood that Esav wasn't going to be a part of the Jewish nation, but the Rav Hirsch really explains that he had a vision that they would work together. He really had a vision that there would be, the Sarha, whatever, there'd be like a president and a Rav Rashi, that there would be spiritual leadership and a physical leadership, and that they really would work together. Mm-hmm. And Rivka said, this isn't going to work. And she had the nevuah that even in terms of subjugation, in terms of political strength, that the younger son would be the leader in that way too.
And that's why she did what she did.
That's why she did what she did.
But it seems like whatever the bracha was that he got, it came through Yosef, not through him. Like I feel like whatever he was wishing him, I didn't see that with Yaakov.
You didn't see it happen.
Right. I see it more.
Well, I agree that it doesn't happen yet. Right. It happens only later. Right. Okay. Yes. But it is clear that the bracha of Abraham was never given. It doesn't seem like Birkat Abraham was ever meant to be given to Esav. Right? It doesn't mention Birkat Abraham until here at the end. Now, I think again, it's the Bechorah and the bracha. The bracha is Birkat Abraham. The blessing is to be a continued nation of Abraham. And Abraham is Veheye bracha, right? Abraham is blessed Veheye bracha. And that bracha goes through, right? But the Bechorah, that's physical inheritance. And Yitzchak was planning to give Esav the physical inheritance and give the spiritual inheritance to Yaakov. Yeah. And I think that a lot of what happens here is that Yaakov kind of got both. And going forward, there are a lot of ideas, both in Chazal and Chassidut, that relate to the fact that something happened here that created a situation that the Jewish nation has to have both. It has to have both physical and spiritual. And the pasuk that we read before, Akol Kol Yaakov ve'yadayim yedei Esav, so it could be understood to say there's a rift between the Kol and the Yadayim, but there are ideas that say that after Yaakov wore the clothes of Esav, something happened. And he also gained the knowledge of Yadayim, the knowledge of physical. And I think that that's part of what's happening here in this piece, that we're gaining kind of another layer, another component. And going forward, Am Yisrael has to learn this balance between spiritual and physical. And that part of that happened here. I think it happened before too, but I think a big part of that happened here. We went really long, and we're not going to have time to read the Sfat Emet, but I am going to mention that what he talks about. I'm going to give it to you, and you're welcome to take a look. And what he talks about here is really less focused on Yitzchak, on Yaakov and Esav, more focused on Abraham and Yitzchak in their relationship, and really the relationship between Ira'ah and Ahava, their attributes, how Abraham was Ahava and Yitzchak was Ira'ah. And I'm just going to say in a sentence that the main idea that he says here is that Ahava and Ira'ah, I'm sorry, I'm backtracking. I got stuck because I love these pieces so much.
We're fine.
Yeah, but I wanted to say this too. So I'm just going to say it very, very short. So Abraham is Ahava and Yitzchak is Ira'ah, right? Ahava is love and Ira'ah is awe or fear. And I want to say love and boundaries or whatever. And what the Sfat Emet here says is that in the physical world, there's a bit of a contradiction between the two. Like what I said before about how it's hard for us to identify with Yitzchak because he represents boundaries. And I think in the physical world, in the not the physical world, in the whole world, the world of, right, the secular world maybe, the two don't easily work together. And part of what the Sfat Emet says is that in the spiritual world, they do. They can really live in peace, these two attributes. And part of what the succession of the Avot teaches us is that, how the Ahava of Abraham had to be paired with the Ira'ah of Yitzchak. And I think this is a really important idea, that part of our relationship with Hashem is understanding this balance between the places of, and I feel like I repeat myself because I say this every week, but I really think that part of our relationship is this understanding that our relationship with Hashem has a part of Ahava. What's Ahava? It's this enthusiastic, right, feeling of love and connection and whatever, and following the rules and the boundaries. And the two really need to be together. They really, you can't have one without the other and have a healthy relationship with Hashem or with religion. And that's really what he says here. Yeah. I really think we need a Yitzchak Appreciation Day.
Let me ask you a question. So, Rivka had Nebuah. Do you think that Yitzchak also had Nebuah? That's why he went through with giving the bracha?
I think that they had different understandings of reality. I don't know what Yitzchak consciously knew and what he subconsciously knew. Like in that like whole thing with the brachot, like it really seems like he had kind of like a split frame of consciousness. Like there was a part of him that was saying, this isn't the right kid. And there's a part of him that was saying, but maybe this is what it's meant to be. That's how I read it. Like I think that also at the end of the day, when he says, and then he says, I'll just read that again. And then at some point he says, I forget, there's somewhere where Chazal understand it to be like, okay, but maybe that was meant to be, but now I don't see it. I don't know. Anyway, but the minute the Chazal asked, there's a machloket if he does this for real when he says, oh my gosh, what? Right? So did he really mean it, or is he saying it just for the benefit of Esav, who was so hurt? And in Pshat, he meant it. But I think that there is something here that he was so unsure throughout that I kind of wish he would like call Rivka and say, hey, can you help me here? Right? Wouldn't you think that that's what he would do? But apparently that wasn't, it wasn't an option for some reason. Yeah, but I feel like part of that story is really giving us kind of two layers. Like there's like a Nikle and a Nistar almost, right? There's like the revealed story and there's something else going on here. And how much did he know and how much did she know? And a lot of the Parshanim, part of what they try to figure out is what were they thinking, right? What were they thinking?
Can I ask a stupid question?
No stupid question.
Wait, it says that Esav married someone from Canaan.
Right.
And it brings it up. And in the past parsha, we talk about Eliezer, that his daughter was Mazocha to marry Yitzchak, but he was because she was from Canaan. Like it was also, is there any mentioning Chazal maybe that he married his daughter?
That's such an interesting question.
I'm just laying it out there.
I
know you have to go. You can check it out and try.
I actually, it's interesting what you're asking because it doesn't say her Yehudit bat be'eri achiti. So it doesn't seem like it's him. It has a name, but interesting. If anybody says it's actually the same person. Or Basmat bat Elon achiti. They're both chiti, and he is the Mesek Eliezer. I don't think he's chiti. I think he's. It's interesting. It's a very interesting thought. What happens to that daughter, right? Did he really?
Right, but I thought that maybe this was his other.
Yeah, I don't know how much consolation this is, but
no, I'm just curious.
It's interesting. And now I'm curious. I'm going to look it up. I haven't heard. It doesn't mean anything. But
right. Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah, okay. I'm very curious now to see what happened. What happens to Eliezer?
Yeah.
And I've got one last question. So when Rivka charges Yaakov to go and prepare the meal and to kill, shecht, whatever he had to shecht, it had to be lefi Chokim of Kashrut. Where does she get that from? Because that isn't even in the Torah.
Right. So again, this is not Pshat. This is Midrash. What you're saying
I don't know. You're telling me.
Right. It does. So this is all Midrash. But like we said, I think we talked about this last week or the week before. So there's these ideas that certain laws of the Torah were just so like ingrained in them. I think that's what the Midrash is kind of building on. And I think shechita, I mean, I don't know all the details of shechita, but shechita, we do kind of have this concept that it was trying to, kill in a more humane way. So like I can accept that shechita would be one of the ones that they would, maybe have intuitively. I mean, I can't say for sure, but it's something that I feel like makes sense.
Especially if Cain and Hevel gave a korban, like you would think that there was some knowledge of something to do with shechita or doing something in the proper way.
Right. Well, we do know, we mentioned in Noach that there was a concept of which animals are tamen and which are tahor, right? So maybe also they had certain rituals that they, All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Totally fine. If you want to start the myth to read it later, does anybody want it? But I'm sorry I didn't take it to it.
Thank you.
I have to share that last night I taught a class. I got home really late, and then I sat down to prepare, and then I fell asleep on my bed, and I woke up. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was Afsakat Shema.
Oh no!
So I said, "Oh, I'm going to sleep." So I went to sleep, and I said, "I'll wake up early, whatever." And then the light went back on, and I came downstairs, and I did this at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my! Oh wow!
So
then we will definitely read it.
Yes, definitely read it and wonder what I was thinking at 3 o'clock in the morning that possessed me to choose these.
I'll let you know if at 3 o'clock you gave us the right.
The right.
Thank you.